As a reminder for this video, you may want to reference this determining if something is an outlier paper. Remember that we have to find the interquartile range, and we want 1.5 times larger than that so that we can see if we add it to Q3, if we have anything outside of that, it's an outlier, or if we subtract it from Q1, anything smaller than that is an outlier. So you may want this sheet for reference as we go through these examples. It has some reminders at the top about how to find an outlier, just like the anchor chart does that I just showed you. It just says we first need to find our Q1 and our Q3, our two quartiles. Then we need to figure out 1.5 times the interquartile range once we figure out what that range is. And then we need to subtract it from Q1 and add it to Q3. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples here, one without the calculator and one using the calculator, just so you can choose how you would like to do it. So first I'm going to go through and write everything that I need to know, and then I'll go back and go through about how to fill it in. All the things that I need my quartiles, I need my interquartile range, I need the interquartile range and 1.5 times larger than that, and then I need to add it and subtract it from Q1 and Q3 to figure out what those boundaries are. So what I had to do for this is go ahead and write my numbers in order if I'm doing this by hand, because I want to be able to find my quartiles. And in order to find my quartiles, I have to be able to take the bottom half and the top half of my data to find the middle. So the first thing I need to do is find the middle of my data so I know where to split it in half. So I'm going to do that by just kind of working my way towards the middle, crossing one off here, one here, 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 here. So I see that my middle number is 2.3, so that's my median. I don't need that information for what I'm doing, but it's good to know. The next thing I need to do is know that my first quartile is going to be the middle of this top 50% of my data. So I'm going to find the middle of that, and that's going to be this number. So my first quartile is 1.6. For my third quartile, I'm going to do that to this upper half of my data. So I'm going to find the middle, which is 4. Okay, so I have my two quartiles to find the interquartile range. I'm going to find the difference between them, the distance. So I'm going to do 4 minus 1.6, and then I'm going to get 2.4 as my interquartile range. Now the reason I need that is because I'm going to take my interquartile range and figure out what is 1.5 times larger than that. So I'm going to take 2.4 and multiply it by 1.5, and I get 3.6. Then I want to find, okay, if I have my first quartile, I need to find 3.6 smaller than that. And if I have my third quartile, I need to find 3.6 larger than that. So I'm going to subtract from Q1 and add to Q3. So I will get -2 here when I do that, and I'll get 7.6 here when I do that. So if I have any numbers smaller than -2, they're an outlier, which I see that I do not. And if I have any numbers larger than 7.6, they're an outlier. So I see that 15 is an outlier because it is larger than 7.6. Next example, I'm going to use the on-screen calculator so you can see that I've gone to desmos.com/testing/Georgia/graphing, and I've just typed in my data set. And so now that I've typed in my data set, I need to find my Q1 and my Q3. So I'm going to go down here, and I am going to use my, scroll over a little bit, use my function, go to stats, and I want my quartile. And if you forget how to type it in, you go over to this little bar and it'll tell you first you need your data set, and then if we want quartile 1, we put (1). So my data set is H, and I'm going to say comma, I want my first quartile. So there's my first quartile, and I can do the same thing for my third quartile, but I'll type a 3 instead. So I'll do H, 3. Okay, so there's my two quartiles. I'm going to copy those down. My interquartile range is going to be the difference between those. So I can just grab my calculator and do that, or you could use Desmos to subtract. My next part is to take that number and see what is 1.5 times larger. So multiply it by 1.5, and you get this. And then the next step is to subtract that number from Q1 or add that number to Q3. So when I do that, I get -117.25, or I get 788.75. So if I have anything smaller than this, so I look through my numbers and I do not have anything smaller, so I don't have a smaller outlier. If I have anything larger than this, I don't. So I actually do not have an outlier in this case, which is surprising because if you look at these numbers, 30 seems like it might be an outlier. But remember, you can't just judge it on what it looks like. You actually need to do this calculation to see if it is an outlier. So we just found out, according to this data, 30 is not an outlier.